Well, good afternoon. Welcome to another Mandelbulb live stream. This is May 31st. It's 4 o'clock Eastern Time, coming to you from Connecticut. So this is a continuation of the live stream of May 10th. And what I wanted to do with this series of live streams was talk about rendering and getting a good quality fractal scene, focusing on the rendering controls. All right, so now Monday, last May 10th, I began talking about the DE stop. Now let's just take a look here at the interface. Okay, here in the calculation panel, this is Mandelbulb as it was first started out. So everything is defaulted here. There's no setup in preparation for this live stream. So in the May 10th live stream, I talked about the DE stop. All right, in relation to the whole process of what's called Raystep marching. All right, so let's review that because we're going to continue with this discussion of the Mandelbulb rendering. What I want to do in this live stream is I want to talk about the Raystep Multiplier, and I want to talk about the Stepwidth Limiter. All right, now those are actually very important rendering controls, and I'll demonstrate why that is, okay? So let's do this. Let's just kind of review and get our heads back around this whole idea of Raystep marching, okay? Now, let's do this. I'm going to switch over to my my blackboard, all right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this DE stop, all right? And I want to talk about this in reference to Raystep marching, okay? Now, if you recall what I did, the way I demonstrated this the last live stream, May 10th, I set up a camera. All right, now everything in Mandelbulb is from the perspective of the camera. And what we're trying to do here is just focus on what it takes to make one particular pixel. For every pixel in this scene, there needs to be a ray that has stepped through the scene, that has eventually assembled a pixel. Not only the actual pixel itself, but its color, its lighting, shading, and all the rest. All right, so in my scene here, I'm going to put a Mandelbulb fractal object. Now keep in mind that this Mandelbulb procedural generation of fractals, what it does is it's making objects in the scene. All right, this is not a 3D polygon type of a modeling environment. This is actually a mathematically generated procedural method of creating objects. So given that, basically, Mandelbulb doesn't know where any of the objects are. So the whole point and purpose of the Raystep rendering method is to find the object in the scene. So what it does is it mathematically shoots out a ray. All right, and now this is just in review of the May 10th live stream. Along that ray, it will take steps, and basically it'll say, all right, let's along the ray, along the path, okay, let's take a step Now, did we hit a fractal? No, we didn't. Let's take another step. Take another step. Did we hit a fractal? No, we didn't. Let's take another step. Did we hit a fractal? No, we didn't. Let's take another step. Now, these steps are pretty much the same, what they call width, okay? Now, that distance is some number. We don't know what that number is, nor do we care. There are internal processes that are helping to define that number, but for purposes of understand the concept of Raystep marching, we don't need to know what those actual values are. Just that. The steps are actually about the same for each step that is taken where it doesn't actually hit a fractal surface, okay? All right, so that's Raystep marching. Now, the DE stop, all right? What the DE stop is, it's referred to as a threshold. The whole idea is that a DE stop, let's say high, well, let's say 10. There's going to be a threshold that's wider than if the DE stop were lower, say 0.1, in which case the threshold would be much smaller. Now, that threshold is really, it is how accurate the renderer is going to be when it approaches a fractal surface, okay? So you note here that it is approaching the fractal surface, these steps along the way, all right? Now, if I have a DE stop that's pretty high, 10, Mandelbulb will say, well, the fractal surface is somewhere in this area, all right? If I have a DE stop that's lower, it says the surface must be somewhere in this area, all right? So the DE stop is actually a threshold. It's a kind of a sensitivity of when the ray approaches a fractal surface, the DE stop will determine how sensitive or how careful the ray becomes when it approaches the surface. I'm trying to describe this in multiple different ways so that you kind of understand the concept, okay? All right, now, so the DE stop is the sensitivity or the threshold when the ray stepping gets close to the surface. And so what happens is you have step, 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 steps, steps, and it gets tighter and tighter. And the whole idea, and here's everything you need to know. The whole idea is that when that ray finally finds the surface, you want that ray to be as accurate as possible because a pixel needs to be formed from that. All right? All right, let's do this. Let's go back to Mandelbulb here. All right. And all right, let's set up. What did we have the last made? We had two amazing boxes, right? Okay, let's set that up. I'm going to do two amazing boxes, calculate that. Okay, we need to get the scale down here. Let's get over to the navigator, all right, and pull those parameters in. I'm just gonna find a good position. All I'm doing here is I'm walking it out. Let's manipulate this scale here. Here we go. I'm only trying to find a scene, a fractal scene that we can work with for demonstration purposes, okay? Now again, we're still in review of this DE stop. All right, so, okay, so let's see what happens. That might be interesting right in there. let's kind of look in here. Walk it in. Okay, very good. Now let's push that back to the main editor. Okay, now let's demonstrate a DE stop that is very wide in its threshold. That would be a higher DE stop number. Let's put a 10 in there, huh? Okay, calculate that. Now you see here, and I demonstrated all of this on the May 10th live stream, but in more detail. So you can go back there and review that. But you'll notice here with a DE stop of 10, my threshold is very large, which means that the ray didn't actually make it to the surface. All right, the ray, stopped right there because it said somewhere in there's the fractal surface, but I don't know where it is, but I think it's right there. But it's not, so it's very soft. Now, that softness is not out of focus. That softness is actually the detail of the fractal surface can't be resolved. All right, you can think of it as being out of focus, but it's not. It's a lack of detail. All right, now, let's go back and set this DE stop to 1. We'll recalculate it. All right, now you can see here that we have better detail. All right. Because, let's see here. So the fractal surface, the ray comes along and says, okay, it's right there. So the ray got much closer to the surface because my DE stop, or my sensitivity threshold, was much smaller. Now, obviously, the lower the DE stop, the tighter the threshold, the more rendering effort needs to be put into creating each pixel. But you get quality. So the reason, one of the reasons that your fractal Mandelbulb images don't look good is because the DE stop is not tuned for that particular fractal scene. All right, now let's get crazy here and let's put in a 0.1. Now what I've really done here is I've really made that threshold very, very small. All right, now if I turn on my magnifier here, now what's happening here is that there's too much detail in the scene, and that's not good either. Okay? All right, so what we've done here is we just reviewed the concept of the DE stop. All right, and just to wrap up the DE stop so that we can move on, the DE stop is actually setting a threshold, all right, of how accurate or how sensitive the renderer is going to be when the ray approaches the surface. The DE stop has nothing to do with the ray itself and the stepping. It's all about how close the ray can get to resolve the surface of the fractal. All right, the higher the DE stop value, the wider the threshold, the less accurate. The tighter the threshold is, the closer to the fractal, but you can overdo it, and then you can start picking up all kinds of junk, or often referred to as artifacts. All right? All right, so let's now talk about two other very valuable rendering settings. Let's turn our attention back to the calculation panel. Now, there's two I want to talk about today. One of them is called the Raystep Multiplier, and the other one here today is the Stepwidth Limiter. Those are two very valuable, and I would dare say underappreciated rendering settings that I'm really not sure if all but maybe the really advanced Mandelbulb enthusiast understand. Now, I think what happens is a lot of Mandelbulb enthusiasts, and I was included early on, you kind of play with those numbers until you get something that looks good over in the main editor. All right, that's fine. What I want to do here is teach you how to understand these settings so that you can control the rendering process. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this Raystep Multiplier. All right, Raystep Multiplier. Okay. All right, so let's do this. Let's go back over to my blackboard, and we're going to be talking about the Raystep Multiplier. All right. Okay. Now, all right. Let's put my camera back in the scene here. Let's put a fractal object in the scene. Let's shoot out a ray. All right. And as we talked about before, the ray is going to, this is all math, obviously, is going to step along here until it approaches the fractal surface, okay? And let's say that we have a reasonable DE stop, or a reasonable value, whatever that might be, 2, pick one. A reasonable threshold, okay? All right. So somewhere in here, the renderer says, hey, there must be a surface here. I can kind of feel it. Anyway, now, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this. I'm going to erase this. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up our scene, but we're really close to the scene here. The camera's way out here. The ray stepping has happened. Okay. All right, so we're just kind of zooming in. Now I had my DE stop, and I had it like that, but we're blown in here, so we're going to make it zoom out. Okay, so we're really close to the surface here. This is the point that I'm trying to make. That the Raystep Multiplier applies when the DE stop begins to be utilized in the scene. All right, so what the Raystep Multiplier does is it's actually it factors the DE stop. All right, for instance, if you have a Raystep multiplier of 1, your DE stop is not modified at all. The Raystep multiplier is a multiplier of the DE stop value. If I had a Raystep multiplier of 2, just to keep things simple, your DE stop value is going to be multiplied by 2. So if I had a DE stop of 1 here, now my Raystep multiplier is a 2, then my DE stop is doubled. Now let's go back over to, well, let's see. I don't want to, yeah, we'll erase that. Okay, let's go back over here. So what I just said is if I have a DE stop of 1 and I have a Raystep multiplier of 1, the DE stop is not modified. Now, this modification of the DE stop happens internally. You don't see it here on the interface. This is internal. And I'll explain why in just a couple minutes. If I have a DE stop, if I have a Raystep multiplier of 0.5, all right, 0.5 times 1 is 0.5. All right, I effectively I cut the DE stop value in half. 0.5 times 1 would be 0.5. If my Raystep multiplier were 2, then the Raystep multiplier multiplies the DE stop. So the DE stop internally becomes 2. All right? Okay. Let's go back to the blackboard now. All right, let's put my fractal back in here. There's the ray coming down here. Here's my DE stop. I'm zoomed in now. All right, and as I explained before, the steps come along here, and it says, "Oh my God, I'm very close to the surface of the fractal." This is when the DE stop kicks in. All right. And let's just say that this right here, this particular threshold, I don't know, let's call it a DE stop of 2, just to pick a number. And a DE stop of 2 is quite reasonable in, when you're constructing a Mandelbulb scene. Now, let's make my Raystep multiplier. Let's make that equal to 1. Okay, so we know that there's no modification to the DE stop. All right, but let's make the Raystep multiplier 2. Now we know that internally that DE stop is multiplied. If we set the Raystep multiplier to 0.5, then we know that my DE stop internally is treated like it's a value of 1. Okay? What the Raystep multiplier does is it internally modifies the DE stop. Now that you got that, now of course the next question is, well, why? Why? All right. Why don't we just go ahead and set the DE stop to whatever we wanted and leave it at that? What the developers were trying to do with this Raystep multiplier control was solve a problem. Let me show you what that problem is. Let's go back to our interface here. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear out, you know what? Let's just make really sure that we have a real clean setup here. I'm going to show you why this Raystep multiplier is valuable. All right. Where did my Mandelbulb go? Oh, come on, where'd you go? Ah, okay. All right, well, let's try it again. Let's do that. Never had this happen before. Well, let's see. It's yeah. All right. It's saying it's running here. Let me clean up a little bit here. I'm on the Windows Task Manager, trying to figure. Oh, there it comes. Okay. Okay. Good. Try that again. There she goes. Okay. Very good. There's an awful lot running on this this PC. This is an i9, and it's got like loads of everything. But you put OBS on here, and various other things hanging off this thing. This PC really earns its keep. I've been hammering this PC for years. I built it I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, and I always overbuild. And so my PCs last longer, but I really beat them up pretty bad. All right, let me show you why this Raystep multiplier, where it applies in the real world. Okay. I'm going to set up a little scene here with the amazing surf. I've been alternate hybrid mode. That doesn't matter because I'm only using one formula. You can repeat this. You can set this up yourself. Now, let's get over the navigator here. All right, we got quite a mess. This is a mess. What I want to do is I want to settle this down, and I want to get to something that I can work with. I don't know, something like that. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna look down, and then I'm going to slide up and slide down. There we go. I'm just using the mouse navigation right here. Let's see. Okay, let's walk in. Let's walk in. Oh, here we go. Okay, very good. I'm using mouse navigation right here. Very good. Let's push that back to main, calculate it, see what we got. Okay, unlike the Amazing box, which was a very thick, very boxy type of a fractal scene, this Amazing surf has a lot of very thin skins, I guess you can call it. The Mandelbulb object itself is very thin, rather as opposed to the Amazing box, which is very boxy, very construction, very bulky. Amazing surf is very thin. This is where the Raystep Multiplier is going to save us. I'll show you. All right. So let's go to the calculation panel. All right, and let's set that Raystep Multiplier to 1. Render that. And so I have lost my scene. Let's set that back to 0.5. Okay, now my fractal surface comes back into play. Let's set that to 0.1. All right, didn't really help. The point is, though, I can now see my very thin fractal surface. Let's set that back to 1. All right, but you say, wait a minute, well, why don't I just adjust the DE stop? Because we know that the DE stop is actually a threshold. All right, so when the ray, hey, I got a nice red pen. Let's make this the ray. So when the ray gets close, it says, the DE stop does its work right in there, okay? But let's see whether or not a DE stop of 2, which is a bigger threshold, is going to get us any better. It doesn't help us at all. Well, let's make the DE stop a tighter threshold. I had 1 there before. Let's put a 0.5 there before. And I have not fixed the problem with the manipulating the DE stop alone. And the reason for that is this. Let's get my object back in. Okay. The ray shot down there. All right, and as you noticed here, I'm messing around with the DE stop. I did it this way, I did it that way, I did it this way, you know, that sort of thing. So these thresholds, all right, no matter what I did with the DE stop, didn't help me any. I still am missing the fractal. And here's the problem. And well, here's the reason why. All right, come on. Here's the reason why. Okay. Get my fractal back in. Get the ray. What's happening is, oh, actually, you know what? I probably should do this. There we go. Okay, here we go. Here's my fractal. Here's my fractal. You say I made the line thinner to kind of prove that it's a thin fractal. It's a very, very thin-skinned fractal. All right, the surface is so thin. So here's what's happening, is that the ray is coming along, the DE stop is kicking in, all right, but what happens is the ray misses it. The ray can't resolve where that surface is. All right. And the reason for that is because the step is too big. All right, so as you remember, we just step, 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 and there we go. The ray missed the fractal surface, just missed it. Missed, M-I-S-S, missed it. Never doesn't see it. Because the step is too big, number one, the stepping, remember now, this is distance estimation. The rendering system does not know where that object is, that fractal object is. Doesn't know where it is. It's got to go find it. Shoot a ray out and see what happens. See where the hit happens. The problem is that the ray just overstepped it, went right through it, and obviously, if you don't see the fractal surface, you're not going to get a pixel out of it. You're not going to get colors. You're not going to get lights. You're not going to get nothing. If you shoot your ray past, if you shoot your ray past the fractal surface, you're not going to get a pixel. So, what the developers of Mandelbulb were trying to do was to handle this situation where the ray could possibly miss the fractal surface, especially when it's very thin. It didn't miss it when it was a Mandel box. It's very bulky, very hard to miss that. All right, now let's demonstrate this. Let's take my Raystep Multiplier over on my scene here equals 1, which means I'm not modifying the DE stop at all. All right, so it misses. It misses a very thin fractal surface. I could prove this to you by firing up the Amazing box, but I think you can pretty much take my word for it. Those particular values would not miss an Amazing box because it's very thin. All right, so what the Mandelbulb software developers were trying to do is to address a situation where the Mandelbulb skin or surface is very thin, and there's a possibility that the ray would shoot past it and never see the surface and obviously make no pixel. So let's prove that. Let's put this to a DE stop of 1, Raystep Multiplier of 1, calculated. Okay, we know by looking over here at the navigator, there's a fractal surface there. We know that. But the renderer can't find it. So let's now say, let's apply a factor to the DE stop. Let's put a 0.5 in there. Render that. All right. So what's happened here? Here's my fractal surface. All right, here's my ray. And what I did, here's my DE stop, whatever it might be. I think that was, we had a 1 there. All right, and we put a Raystep multiplier of 0.5. So what we did is we reduced this DE stop in half. 0.5 times 1 is 0.5. Okay, and so now the renderer came along and had a much better chance of hitting that very thin surface fractal. Okay, and so now we actually have something. We have pixels. Pixels have been created, and we can see a very thin-skinned fractal object. So that Raystep multiplier internally applies a factor, a multiplication or a division factor, on the DE stop so that the ray has a better chance of actually hitting a very thin fractal. Well, that's it. All right, now let's put this back to 1, calculated. All right, and we've shown that no matter what you do here with this DE stop, you're not ever going to see, at 0.5. You're never going to see that very thin fractal, but we know it's there. Okay? Now, let's put this back to 1. Let's say that we really slam this down. Wow. Okay. Let's see what we get. Now, my surface is beginning to come back again because I have, that was a period, right? Not a comma. Let's try that again. Okay. I put that DE stop down to 0.1. Wow. Okay. And the Raystep multiplier to 0.1. So 0.1 times 0.1 is what? It's 0.05. I'm sorry. The DE stop divided by 0.1, all right, gives us a DE stop of 0.2. So we're beginning to get the fractal surface detected again, but we have dramatically ramped up the internal effort that it required to render this scene. And this is just one formula. One formula. Can you imagine if you had 6 formulas or 4 formulas in a transform and maybe in one of the hybrid modes up here? What you're doing by forcing that very, very, very tiny DE stop threshold internally, you're brute forcing to get your render. But your render is costing you an awful lot of CPU rendering cycles. And it's not worth it, especially if you're trying to make an animation. So if you quadrupled the amount of time to render times 10,000 frames, that really adds up. You don't need to do that. You don't need to brute force it like that. You can get a reasonable DE stop, all right, and then use your Raystep multiplier to give you a render which is less intensive in terms of computations of each of these rays. And keep in mind, if you have an HD 1920 by 1080 image, what do you got? 2 million pixels? That's 2 million rays that have to be figured out very quickly. When you start piling additional rendering effort on that, you're just taxing the system, and you're not buying yourself anything. As a matter of fact, if we were to actually look at this, all right, I just put my brute force settings in there. If we look at that, the quality is horrible. It's horrible. So I can brute force my very thin fractal surface to come back into view, but I don't have good, I just don't have good quality. All right, let's go back to something reasonable. Okay. All right, well, let's see, we needed a 0.5 Raystep multiplier to be able to see anything at all. All right, let's take a look at that. Well, the quality is better, but I haven't fine-tuned my rendering yet. All I did here right now is I just showed you that the quality is better when I properly utilize the Raystep multiplier. All right? All right. All right. So the whole idea here is to not have to brute force the renderer to work much harder, because you're going to lose quality if you do that, and you're going to ramp up rendering time. The idea is to manipulate these render-related controls, settings, so that you have a good balance between quality and render time. You're not always just interested in quality. Because if you want to do an animation, all right, you got to consider the time it takes to render each of these frames. And I'm just at 480 by 360. This is like nothing. If you wanted to do a 4K 3840 by 2160. If you want to do a 4K and you don't have your rendering settings optimized, not only are you going to be waiting for one of these things to render, but an animation of 10,000, you'll be at it for 30 days. All right, so let's move on now and let's talk about this Stepwidth Limiter. Okay. All right, I'm going to leave my settings right where they are because I'm getting a decent setup here. Now let me explain to you what this Stepwidth Limiter is. Perhaps the third, in terms of ranking, the third most important render control of this whole panel here. All right, so let's go over my blackboard here. Let's talk about what a Stepwidth Limiter is. I'm going to put my thin fractal surface in there because the Stepwidth Limiter is actually also to deal with very thin Mandelbulb fractal object surfaces. Right? So I got my fractal surface back in there. All right, same thing as before. All right, I'm going to shoot out a ray. All right. Now, when I was talking about the Raystep Multiplier, I was telling you that that is a factor that is applied to the DE stop. All right. So the Raystep Multiplier has something to do with the DE stop. Oh, come on. Why can't I erase here properly? Here we go. All right. So now we're going to talk about the Stepwidth Limiter. And it doesn't have anything to do with the DE stop, unlike the Raystep Multiplier does. The Stepwidth Limiter is something else. It's not related to the DE stop. And let me show you. All right, so I've been demonstrating or illustrating the steps along the ray. All right? And from today's review and May 10th, you know, we were saying, okay, did you get a hit? No. Did you get a hit? No. Did you get a hit? No. All right, and I also explained that there's a particular step width here. All right. Now, the Raystep Limiter, what that does is it reduces the steps, the step width between where Mandelbulb would have normally have stepped. The Stepwidth Limiter is reducing that step. All right. So if I have a Stepwidth Limiter of 1, there's no reduction. All right, but if I have a Stepwidth Limiter of 0.5, then what Mandelbulb would normally step is now cut in half. All right, so each one of these steps is now cut in half with a Stepwidth Limiter of 0.5. All right. Okay. Okay. If I was to put a Stepwidth Limiter of 5 in there, or 8, whatever, what it does is it makes this it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work because the Mandelbulb internally is deciding what this step width is. If I were to put a Stepwidth Limiter of 5 or 6 or 10 or whatever in there, it doesn't limit anything because because Mandelbulb is already determining a step width that is less than this crazy number that I put in here. So the point being is that the Stepwidth Limiter is effective when it is less than 1. 0.5, 0.8, 0.1, whatever. It's only effective when the value is less than 1. A value of 1 doesn't do anything because 1 times whatever that step width is that step width. Let me clean up this mess here. Why don't we just clear the screen, start over again. Now, let's get my fractal surface back in. All right, let's get my ray, shoot my ray down there. All right, and normally, all right, you know, he would do something like that, okay? And I don't know if you noticed this or not, but again, I overshot the surface. Because what Mandelbulb did in deciding its own step widths right here, all right, it overshot that very thin fractal surface. And so basically the renderer didn't really do a very good job in detecting where that very thin fractal surface is and overshot it again. All right, so in comes the Stepwidth limiter, and we set that to 0.5. And so each one of these steps now internally is cut in half. And there's a much better chance that the renderer is going to find that very thin fractal surface. All right, let's test it. Okay. All right, so I got a DE stop of 1.5. Okay, we know we're hitting the surface here. Let's go back to a 1. All right, Raystep Multiplier. Now we're missing the surface now. All right, and Mandelbulb is deciding what the step widths are going to be. I'm not modifying the step width at all. Let's put a 0.5 in there. Now I'm telling Mandelbulb here, I'm telling the renderer system of Mandelbulb, I'm saying, look, I don't trust your ability to decide what the step width is going to be. So I'm telling you, I'm not going to let you have any more than half, 0.5, half of what you think you should step. I'm going to say, I'm basically saying, I don't trust your internal stepping size calculation. I'm going to tell you to do it half. So I'm going to put a 0.5 in there, and I'm going to calculate it. All right, and now I'm going to put a 0.5 in there. Now, you see the surface coming back again now? You see this? All right. The surface is being found again because I'm telling, and it's actually pretty cool the way this works. All right, camera, this is my ray, my object. It's pretty cool the way it works because normally it would say, okay, I'm going to step along that way. I'm saying, no, 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 don't do that. I did a 0.1 here. I want you to do that. Oh, yeah, okay. All right, you're bound to hit the surface if you do those little tiny steps like that. No problem. And as you can see here, my fractal, very thin fractal surface is starting to be found again. All right, and that's the key. But again, I have committed the sin of causing the renderer to work overtime. I'm brute forcing it. What I did is I took this Raystep limiter and I slammed it way down, and I got all these little steps like that. That's overkill. There's no need to do that. That's forcing the renderer to spend a lot of time. And number one, I'm not getting a good rendering. And number two, I'm forcing the renderer to work quadruple overtime for no benefit. All right, so now the Raystep limiter works in conjunction with the other settings. It's not intended to work on its own. It's a fine-tuning approach where you utilize the DE stop, the Raystep Multiplier, and the Stepwidth Limiter in conjunction with one another, depending upon your Mandelbulb fractal scene. Very boxy, very, very bulky. You make your rendering adjustments accordingly. Very thin skin, like I have here with Amazing Surf, you make your rendering settings accordingly. So let's see if we can do something nice with this. Very thin-skinned. I know something exists there. My job is I got to get that thing rendered decently, otherwise I lose my job. So let's do this. So my thinking is I'm going to start right here. 1, 1, and 1. And I'm going to think this through now. I'm going to say, well, I'll tell you what, let's think it through on a blackboard here. Okay? All right, I know I have a thin fractal surface, and I understand, which I hope you do, I understand the distance estimation ray marching methodology, and I understand that from the camera's point of view, there's going to be a ray, a mathematical process that's going to be shot out, and that there are going to be basically guesses as at sample points. Did I hit? Did I hit? Did I hit? And I understand all of that now. All right. I also understand that my DE stop is going to be the threshold or the sensitivity when that ray comes close to the surface. I also know that that surface is very thin, so I know that that ray has got a very good chance of shooting beyond it. So then I say, well, all right, I don't need a huge DE stop. All right, I don't need a very tiny one either. Let's make our DE stop. This is one up here on the screen. So now I engage the other two controls. I'm going to set my Raystep Multiplier. I'm going to set that to 0.5. And I'm going to set my Stepwidth Limiter. I'm going to set that to 0.52. All right, so I'm telling the internal renderer, have that, cut it in half, so you have tiny, smaller DE stop values. And I'm also going to tell the renderer, look, don't make those big steps like that. Cut those steps in half. I don't need to make them really tiny. Now let's see if my logic here, thinking this through and understanding the ray marching methodology that Mandelbulb uses, let's go over to the screen here, to the interface, and see whether or not those values work. All right, 1 on the DE stop, 0.5 limiter. Okay, render that. Okay, pretty decent. All right, let's get the magnifier up. All right, I still got some work to do in terms of quality. That's it, but there's other things we can do. What I wanted to show in this live stream, and I think I have, I've demonstrated it, that the DE stop is not the most important control in terms of rendering. It's not. It happens to be at the top, but it's not. It's just part of the whole system. The Raystep Multiplier can be tuned so that the DE stop works better depending upon your scenario. And the Stepwidth Limiter can be tuned to basically say to the render, stop stepping through the fractal world so aggressively. Back off. Take smaller steps. All right. Let's do something here. I'm going to put this back to 1. No. Yeah, I'm going to put it back to 1 and 1. And I'm going to real quick here, I'm going to throw my amazing box back in here. Okay. Oh, actually, that's probably all I need. Okay. And what's happening here is that my camera is buried in there. Let's get unburied. Let's go over to the navigator and let's find something interesting. Yeah. Just kind of zoom in here. Well, that might work out pretty good. Okay. So let's push that back over to main, recalculate it. Okay. All right, so DE stop of 1, Raystep Multiplier is 1, which means I'm not modifying the DE stop, and I'm still getting something decent. The quality's horrible, but I'm getting something decent. I do not need the Raystep Multiplier in this case. The Stepwidth Limiter also is a 1. So a 1 is not modifying the width, or it's not limiting the width of the steps that Mandelbulb decides. So Raystep Multiplier of 1 effectively is doing no modification of the DE stop. A Stepwidth Limiter is doing no modification of the internal stepping size. So I didn't have to employ any of these. All I need to do here is messing around with my DE stop. Better quality. All right. So the DE stop alone sort of gets me there. And this is where I would have to say most Mandelbulb beginners actually stop here and they try to get something out of the DE stop. They might accidentally say, well, what if I do that? Well, that number, well, that looks much better. You know, well, maybe what if I do, I don't know, 1.2? Let's see what that looks like. Okay, something like that. Okay, that looks, well, let's go 0.8, you know. And you see where this is going here. What I'm doing, what I just did there is hunt and peck. I don't understand what I'm doing. I don't understand the internals of the rendering, and I'm not utilizing these rendering controls. I'm not utilizing them properly. I'm just hunting and pecking and seeing what I can do. Now, to sum up this whole thing, if you can utilize these render settings, you're in control of the renderer, and you have a much, much, much better chance of getting a render that is of high quality, minimum artifacts. And I also talked about in the May 10th live stream, I was also saying that an optimum rendering is going to give you optimum lighting, optimum ambient occlusion, shadows. It's going to give you better what are called normals. So when the ray hits the surface here, all right, a normal is 90 degrees off of the surface. Normal. And those normals are critical for lighting, shadowing, coloring. If you don't get your renderer optimized, you're not going to get your lighting and your coloring optimized, because it all comes down to that renderer. The renderer, that ray, its only job is to figure out where that fractal surface is so that it can make a pixel. All right, each ray 1 pixel. If it can't make if it can't make a good render, you're not going to get a good scene. And matter of fact, the lighting is all messed up here too. You see these shadows down here? All right, all these shadows are brownish and ugly. DE stop way off, way off. The ray stopped too soon. So when the ray stops too soon, the system can't figure out the normal. All right, there's my fractal surface. Here's a ray coming in. Normally the ray would hit, and then when normal would be defined like that, 90 degrees off the surface. If the ray stops, it's not going to make a good normal. It's just not going to figure out how to do it. It might guess at it. So I got shadows here, which are bad. Let's get back down to, say, 1. All right, now let's see, these shadows are much better. All right, they're much more realistic. They're more graded out. They fan out better. All right, you get the point. The point is that a bad rendering is going to get you bad lighting. It's going to get you bad shadowing, everything else. So everything in Mandelbulb, in terms of the final fractal scene that you get, everything comes down to how it's rendered. And you have the advantage of being able to control the renderer. Most graphic applications, they're going to hide all of this stuff from you. You know, maybe they'll use AI and they'll mess around with it, and they'll have internal systems that say, oh, geez, the user's not going to want this. Let's try that. And this all happens internally with algorithms and software. What the developers of Mandelbulb did is they brought those internal controls out to you for you to be able to utilize to fine-tune the renderer. But in order for you to fine-tune that renderer, you need to understand what the renderer is doing. Ray distance estimated, ray step marching. All right, so we're going to pick this up again in another live stream. I think we'll go for. I'll try to put together a live stream for this time, Sunday the 7th. I'm going to try. Watch the channel for me to announce that and post the announcement. And then we'll continue, and we'll talk about this step count for binary search. We'll talk about this smooth normals. We'll pick these other ones up. I think we can pretty much wrap up the discussion of why your renders look bad in the upcoming live stream, which I will announce, by finishing up on these other controls. We'll talk about this vary DE stop and FOV as well. And that will pretty much get you in a good shape for understanding how to tune the renderer so that you can get not only good sharp images, but good lighting, good shadowing, and be able to deal with different scenarios where you might have a very bulky, relatively easy to render scene like I have here, or you have a scene with lots of small, tiny objects or very thin surfaces, which are very difficult to render at a high quality unless you understand the rendering system and its controls. Okay? All right, so I hope this has helped. It's deep, but Mandelbulb is deep. There's a lot to it. This is an absolutely amazing software, in my opinion, and the opinion of others as well. Not only does this give you virtually unlimited fractal scene creation with 425 formulas that you can pick from, but also 6 formula slots, 3 different hybrid modes, and then over here, lighting and coloring that is cinematic if you want it to be. But you need to understand how to get to what you want in terms of quality, in terms of capability, all right? And one of the underlying requirements for being able to get really good stuff out of Mandelbulb is to understand the rendering that goes on behind the scenes and be able to manipulate the critical rendering internal behavior, which is what this calculation panel provides you. All right? Very good. All right, so that's it. I'll see you in the next live stream. Hey, thanks everybody for showing up and your wonderful comments. This has been a treasure of information. Thank you. I appreciate that. Looking forward to following session. Thank you. Another comment. Agree. Amazing. Thank you for that. And thank you, Patrick. Very nice. I'm very happy that that everybody came and that you got value from this. And at this point, I would say, fire up Mandelbulb and go create something. All right. I'll see you around. Take care. Bye-bye.